Some of you may very well remember back in the early days of, shall we say, Theresa May's somewhat turbulent, troubled leadership. Out of the very department that was meant to be getting Brexit done at the time, the department for leaving the European Union, which was very much ceremoniously axed as an act by Boris Johnson to try and prove that they had finally got Brexit done, when we are still seeing things where are still affecting the UK because of Brexit. And which department does that fall under? We are seeing lots of chaos happen in those particular departments. But one of the key things, and one of the reasons why its department got axed ultimately, I think, was because they were charged with publishing impact assessment reports on how, essentially, at the time, Theresa May's deal might affect the UK. And of course, they published a range depending on what type of Brexit, because again, no one knew what type of Brexit they were actually voting for, or the one that they actually wanted to put into place. Hence, so much of the chaos around at that time. The discussion was, what on earth is Brexit? And it's still, well, we know what type of Brexit we got today because, again, there was a far-right coup, essentially, to take over the government and put in the hardest possible Brexit they could be. But one of the things is specifically to get rid of that department so that there can be no more impact assessments. And as yet, there has been no British impact assessment for Boris Johnson's deal because, again, no one wants to, shall we say, admit or do an impact assessment to say that Boris Johnson's deal was absolutely awful and terrible and that it should have never, ever have been voted through in the first place. So this essentially leaves us with having to leave it to the EU to essentially do our own impact assessment. And surprise, surprise, turns out it's not good. It is not good look for us. But again, that's what we've been saying for a while. And essentially, as soon as we soon to start, shall we say, come out of the coronavirus and things start to get back to normal, we will start to see more and more impacts on our economy. And as we've said before, the best worst case scenario for Brexit: less exports, less investment, less jobs, smaller economy, less tax revenue. That ain't going to be good for the UK. None of that is good for our economy. So, before we jump into today's article, please do remember to hit that like, share and subscribe button. And of course, down below there is a link to my Patreon page, as well as a one-off donation link called Buy Me a Coffee, where you can, buy me a coffee. And thank you to all those people who do support me that way. So, this comes from The Independent. The title is Brexit Trade Deal to Swipe Over £450 billion from the UK economy over the next 2 years. EU analysis finds. So, the Brexit trade deal will swipe around over £450 billion over the next 2 years from the UK economy, a Brussels analysis says, after Boris Johnson has refused to carry out his own study. And the economic damage will be 4 times greater than that suffered by the EU from the putting up of daunting new trade barriers to cross-channel trade. So the Christmas Eve agreement, hailed as, quote, fantastic by the Prime Minister, will cut UK output by 2.25% by the end of 2022 compared with the EU membership, the analysis has found. The annual gross domestic product, or the GDP, standing at around £2 trillion, where such a loss would be equivalent to around £45 billion over the next 2 years. And although the hard exit terms also mean to hit the EU economy, that loss is estimated to only be around 0.5% over the same period. So once again, the claims that they needed us more than we needed them fall flat yet again on its face. The European Commission has said that avoiding the threat of a no-deal outcome before the New Year's Day deadline improves the situation. But its winter economic forecast added it cannot come close to matching the benefits of the trading relations provided by EU membership. The figures are the first to appear to back up the overwhelming verdict of economists that this skeleton deal and leaving the single market and the customs union will hurt the UK economy. Only what we've been saying since the very, very beginning. The government has repeatedly refused to carry out its own analysis. Trade Minister Liz Truss was telling MPs last month that it was time to move forward. However, assessments have been released for much less significant rollover deals with tiny economies such as Moldova and North Macedonia, and for trade targets including US, Australia and New Zealand. All of the analysis have showed whatever deals are signed, they cannot come close to compensating for ending the frictionless trade with the UK's biggest market. The Treasury has been asked to respond to the Brussels verdict, which comes amid months of mounting business fury over the blizzard of new red tape hitting trade. The last gasp agreement maintained a zero tariffs on the sale of goods crossing the Channel, but only if firms meet rules of origins on the products. And the paperwork and customs checks and confusion over the new systems have slowed up delivery significantly, forcing some firms to give up on EU trade altogether. The Commission said the shock from these so-called non-tariff barriers amounted to the equivalent of tax on imports worth 10% for the EU and around 8.5% for the UK. And obviously the absence of any specific agreement for services, which forms about 80% of the British economy, would further hurt the UK and some EU nations. However, avoiding a crash-out Brexit and moving towards World Trade Organization terms had reduced the much further damage for the UK by a quarter. So, as you can already see, this is why they did not want to do an economic assessment. No one wants to be the bearer of bad news. And essentially, it's shocking that we are doing impact assessments for deals like with, North Macedonia and Moldova. Yet we are not trying to examine what has gone on here and what has just happened. Because, again, if they were to actually admit that this hard deal and this skeleton agreement and leaving the single market and the customs union was bad and was going to hurt our economy, then that also must mean that Brexit was not a good idea. And shock horror, we can't be admitting that. And as I've said before, multiple times, this particular government at this time is going to be obsessed with trying to prove that Brexit is some sort of success. And I'm still very much predicting that towards the end of this year, Boris Johnson or Liz Truss or someone in the government is going to release some sort of document or news or pamphlet or something like we saw a couple of weeks ago, well, not a couple of weeks ago, a couple of months ago now, of the, quote, 3 businesses that were, quote, flourishing because of Brexit. And again, on closer analysis of these businesses, they weren't doing as well as the government was claiming. So ultimately, I do think we will see something like that, something to try and prove that Brexit was an overwhelming success. And again, the economics and the analysis and all the trade experts are all saying this is an absolutely dumb idea. This is not going to work. And the more and more that the government clings to this idea, the more they will go down in flames with it. Like I say, we have reached the crashing point of our train, and we are still in the slow car crash process, pretty much because of the coronavirus. But when things start to get back to normal, even more of this stuff is going to have an impact on our economy, as well as signing these quote-unquote amazing trade deals. Again, the Australian trade deal, we don't know the full details of it yet, but we only know about the farming, which is going to end up destroying British farming. We've seen the Japan deal, which overwhelmingly favours Japan and only favours us by about 17%. How on earth is that a good trade deal for us? And as we said before, if these trade deals cause our economy such a problem and we want to try and renegotiate with them, then we start from an incredible position of weakness. And this was done and caused by these Tories who go on so much crying about, free trade and all this nonsense because they're trying to create a Britain that once existed way back in, the 18th century, where we had a massive empire and colonies that we could exploit. That ain't happening anymore, guys. The world has moved on. And it looks like that our guys in charge are still stuck to this ideology. And once again, as we've said, because they are so stuck to this ideology, when things start to go wrong, it's not their ideology that's going to go wrong, it's something else. So, as always, thank you for watching. Please do remember to hit that like, share and subscribe button. And of course, down below there is a link to my Patreon page, as well as a one-off donation link called Buy Me a Coffee, where you can, buy me a coffee. And as always, thank you to all those people for watching, and we'll see you next time.